This season of the Urban Conservative Podcast is brought to you by Newton for Senate, working to improve education, reduce taxes, and keep North Carolina #1 for business. Find out more at newtonforsenate.com. This episode of the Urban Conservative has also been sponsored by Case Technology Consulting. Help your business get value out of its data and become more efficient and streamlined. Case Technology Consulting. Check out the link in the description. All right, ladies and gentlemen, you know what it is. It's Monday night. It's 8 o'clock. It's time for the Urban Conservative Podcast. I am Abdul Ali, joined with my twin brother Raheem, architect Soto. And I know y'all are like, wait a minute, what's going on? Brain fry, overload, what's happening here? Bro is down here in North Carolina.
We are. Shout out to the good folks out in Rocky Mount. Interesting day in Rocky Mount. Very interesting place. A lot of potential there. But yeah, I'm here. We in the flesh. We together. I know you guys are probably not used to seeing that, me being up in New York. So shouts out to all of the New York folks. Shouts out to Heather and the whole entire EQ fire department. We had an amazing ceremony, induction ceremony.
100 and something years with your fire department?
And what do you call that? Inception?
Installation.
Yeah,
installation.
So shouts out to all of the new folks that came in and all of those folks that have decades and decades in the fire services, not just in New York, but everybody that does go out there and volunteer and risk their lives for, dealing with emergency services and things of that nature. We really, really appreciate you. Ali, we got an interesting interview today, bro.
We do have an interesting interview for you, ladies and gentlemen, coming up today. So before I do that, I just got to tell y'all, this brother's entire story is a testament to what this country is and what you can become if you work hard, if you stick to it, if you keep the faith, if you do all of those things. I'm not going to tell you the brother's story. We're going to let him do it for you. We are joined by today, I'm just really excited to have this brother on the show, Representative Ken Fontenot, representing Wilson and Nash County in North Carolina's 24th District. Welcome to the Urban Conservative, my brother.
Thank you, Abdul. I appreciate you having me. Very exciting times.
Well, I'm glad that you took the time out. We know y'all got a lot going on in Raleigh, and we're going to talk about that here in a minute. But first things first, always what we like to try to start out doing is getting folks familiar with who you are as a person. So bring us back to the beginning. Who is Ken Fontenot? Where did you come from? Background and all that stuff. Just give us the 1-2, bro.
So I guess my story begins when I was 21 years old. I always tell my story that my mom worked on Bill Clinton's campaign in the 90s. My sister worked on Harold Washington's campaign, first Black mayor of Chicago. And that's what I knew. However, when I was 21, I had a conversion experience where I came to know Christ. And for whatever reason, for me, that equated to actually caring about politics, to the point where I began to study what I believed and why. And the more I researched at that time, the Democratic platform, because that's what I was, I didn't agree with any of it. I mean, it was just absurd. And then looking back, I look at Southside Chicago, and it has always been Democratic. Always. The state is Democratic. The legislature is Democratic. The governor is Democratic. And yet they have failed, utterly failed, to come up with any type of solution to make life better for the impoverished, and especially for low-income African Americans. And Therefore, I refuse to give them any type of loyalty because they have not delivered. And therefore, I started doing more research. I realized my views were very Republican. And when I did my Republican research, I'm like, holy smokes, Frederick Douglass was a Republican. The first civil rights bill under Eisenhower was a Republican bill. The anti-lynching bill in the 1940s was a Republican bill. Martin Luther King was a Republican. And you just follow that line. The first 2 Asian governors in America were Republican. Bobby Jindal, Nikki Haley, and still the only 2 Asian governors. So what I discovered launched me into politics, and that was kind of where my political awakening happened.
So let me go back a little bit. talk a little because I want folks to understand that when you talk about the struggle of low income African American folks and we talk about all of these social issues, you kind of know firsthand what that's like. We grew up separated from each other in juvenile homes and foster homes, so we know what the system is like. But what was it like growing up in the situation in Chicago that you were in?
So I grew up in Southside Chicago, an area called Pilsen Little Village. In the 1990s, when I lived there, it was the second most violent neighborhood in all of the nation.
Mm,
East LA at the time was number one, and we were number two. At age 6 years old, I had my sister lived in the projects, and there was a spot where I could see blood from someone who was executed. When I was 3 years old, someone had stumbled onto my porch in the middle of the night, shot by gangs, and we had to call the cops to get them help. So these things were very, very normal to me as a child, the gang violence, knowing that after dark you had to come home because you might get hurt if you weren't, and the abject struggle to be in the jungle of Chicago at the time where most of my friends now are dead or in jail. Or if you were to go back and look at the people I went to elementary school with or middle school, most of them are dead or in jail. I am the anomaly of the group, and I give my mother credit for that. And I think God had a plan for me, but it was a very hopeless situation, um, very tragic, very sad, and in one sense, I got to witness and live the cycle that
mm.
most young people go through, except my story diverged in middle school when my mother realized that unless she left Chicago, I would have no future or hope.
Wow, bro. I wonder, and maybe this is a little off subject, but we did go out to Rocky Mount today, and there's some issues out there. Did growing up, do you notice now there was this sense of almost like a hopelessness in some of these communities when you drive through them? Um, has that changed much? Because we see a lot of the patterns being repeated. You spoke about your peer group, and that's familiar to us. A lot of our guys in our age group are serving federal prison time, and we'll never see
Hmm.
going to be, you know, they're very sick and things of that nature. But there's this sense of despair that we're very all too familiar with, and we can pick up on it, right? So what did you do for the young person that might be hearing this? What did you do to escape that? Because we could have all felt influenced to that peer group, and like you said, we're the anomaly. So I just want you to speak a little bit about that, because I want to say this, and I seen a lot of dollar stores and churches which said faith and not a lot of money. So there's there, right? But how did you work through that environment?
So I first have to give credit to my mom. You know, she pulled me out of that environment. But the second thing I would give credit to was a decent school system. And what I mean is, my mother moved from Chicago, Illinois to central Louisiana, where, like, my first day of school, fifth grade, the teacher looks at me and says, Kenny, do you want to use a bathroom? And I looked up at her and I said, yeah. And the next thing you know, this little old lady looked at me and says, yeah. She said, you better say, yes, ma'am. Don't you sass me. And I'm like, son, I'm earth shocked. I'm shell shocked. And she's like, here, you say, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir. And that was a school system I went to. Up into the eighth grade, they paddled you without parental permission because it was just a local culture.
Did you
And
say
above all,
paddle? Did you say
paddle. Yes, they wore your behind out. I mean, I was one time in seventh grade with my cousin who was an eighth grader. He played football. He was a lineman. We're in the line. I barely shoved this guy. The minute I do, the assistant principal walks out the corner and says, oh, you want to touch each other? I'm going to touch you. Principal's office right now. You're getting swats. And just like that, bend over, grab your ankles, you got swats. You know, and they were like on it. But the thing that I found was that they didn't care what color you were, what your background was. They expected excellence, and you were gonna deliver. There was no excuse. You absolutely positively could, and that was it. And at an early age, that got beat into my head that it doesn't matter who I am, I can succeed. And for Louisiana, with all of its flaws, they really believed that. I mean, they drove it home, and they had great scholarship opportunities for college. And so I would say that really helped me. And when I was a teacher, that is really what I put into place in my students. And I could say it worked. Within 1 year, I had the Gentleman's Agreement Mentoring Program, which is very similar to the way I was educated, not with the corporal punishment, but with the expectations of standards.
Right.
And I was able to build the largest middle school mentoring program in 1 year. And we were able to move kids who were borderline failing into the A and B range because my standard was you're not getting in this club unless you maintain a B, and you do not go on any trips we go on or participate in any extracurricular activities if you get demerits because you can. And you know what? They did. It's mind blowing to see the success these young men had.
Well, we're gonna talk a little bit more about your history there, kind of what more led you into politics. Right after this quick commercial break, ladies and gentlemen, you're checking out the Urban Conservative Podcast. We're kicking it with Representative Kim Fontenot right now. We'll be right back after this quick break.
Just because you're black doesn't mean you have to vote Democrat. This year, in order to see benefits for our communities, we need to vote outside the box. Find out more by visiting us at tuconservative.com.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back here on the Urban Conservative Podcast. If you haven't done so already, please jump over to tuconservative.com. Get yourself a membership. You can also click on that sponsor and episode tab to help us keep this dice rolling when we're doing a little thing that we do, which is helping to spread conservative ideas, conservative principles and values, and the benefits of conservative policymaking to urban communities across the country. Again, we were out in Rocky Mount today, which is you got Wilson and Nash counties. You represent them in the House. Before we talk about you there now, you did run once before. So what was it like running the first time? Walk us through first of all, the idea of running. What put the idea of running for the state house in your mind? And then I want to talk a little bit about how you decided to come on over to the Republican side. But what made you run in the first place?
So I don't know. I think God gifted me with political and policy awareness. Give you an example. At age 15, Amazon is this new online bookstore. And for whatever reason, no one telling me why to do it, I bought every single one of Dr. Martin Luther King's books and read them all. And I just was interested. And so 4 years ago, when I had my first run for office, I was sitting at the corner of Tarboro and Forest Hills Road. And I looked at my then competitor's sign. And the thing that infuriated me about the sign was that this representative didn't live in the county, she didn't do any work, and she was not at all working for the behalf of the people. She just was not. And I remember praying, God, I don't know anything about politics, and I certainly don't have the money to pursue any type of office. But if you open the door for me, I will gladly run that race. I kid you not. No one knew I prayed that prayer. 2 weeks later, a pastor friend who I really don't talk to very often said, hey, I nominated you in the Republican Party to run for North Carolina House. They're looking for someone. They think you can do it. Everybody knows your reputation because I've always been a community leader and expect a call. So they gave me a call. I talked to my wife. I talked to my church. I talked to my mother-in-law, talked to my sisters. Everybody thought I should do it. And that's what I did. I literally jumped into the race and I gave it everything I had.
Well, I will tell you this. I remember the excitement around because I've been around GOP politics for a minute. So I remember hearing, I know Christy File and the folks out there and and Wilson. And so, that's about right. So joining the Republican Party it didn't sound like too hard of a step being a Christian. It did it sounded like for us, it was like hand in glove almost once all the stuff came down. So now that you're in the House, you're up there, you're representing. I got a call from a friend of ours earlier. He may jump in on this. And he was surprised that there's a minority Republican in the House. So you're walking into the state house. You've won the election. You're walking into the state house. You got my weight, all of the North Carolina Black Republicans' weight. You got everybody's weight on your shoulders, your entire community. What does that feel like walking into the state house for the first time as a representative?
I only could say it's kind of like being on a roller coaster, but even more than that, if you could ride a tsunami as it spreads, I think it kind of feels like that because one, I've been treated extremely well by the party, and like I've had
Good.
lots of latitude to immediately get my policies into place. For instance, the Call Me Mister program, where we're going to incentivize minority men, particularly African Americans, into the classroom because nationwide we see that when you put minority men in the classroom, minority student performance go up. It just does. I don't think it's a mystery. When you look at more minority students, usually the male figure is one lacking. And also, we're the most underrepresented school. That bill has already made it, and we're about to vote on it. Another bill, I wanted to illegalize embalming fluid, which is currently not illegal for drug consumption, as odd as that may sound.
What?
That happened. Yeah, I know, right? No, it is not illegal right now to use embalming fluid for drugs. If you get caught with it, the sheriff just throws it away. They cannot prosecute.
Hold on. Wait. Hold on.
Makes sense. I'm from a community here where in Central Islip, New York, where have you ever heard of Bombazi before?
No, I haven't, but it
Oh,
sounds
well,
good.
that's embalming fluid. That's the name
Mm.
for it. That's the drug name, and this has been going on since the early '90s. And it's shocking now that you've mentioned that because in my mind I'm going, well, clearly it's a drug,
We always thought
right?
it was illegal.
I thought if you got caught with that, you go to jail, like if you had crack or anything else. So what you're telling me is that there are places where you could have the embalming fluid in the cannabis or however they do it. I don't know if it's a jar. I don't know anymore. I'm not up to date on these things, but you would think this would be a controlled substance because it's a dangerous chemical. And I've seen people crack their skulls open, unfortunately, and do
Hmm.
bad stuff from it. Like I don't know if the public is aware.
Of how bad an
This is some
embalming, yeah.
it's a
Wow.
dangerous thing, but it's not new, unfortunately, and it's mostly black and brown people hurting themselves and it's in our communities where this is taking place. It's a fact. I'm just shocked that you said that. Like
It was mind blowing. I sat down with my sheriff. I said, "Hey, embalming fluid." He said, "It's not illegal. We can't do anything about it." I said, "Would you help me write a bill and help me write the law?" We did. Now it's going to be a felony. It's passed through the House, and you know what's interesting? The only people to speak against this were radical leftists. It's funny because we split the party. All the Republicans were behind it,
wait,
and
wait.
then we had the minority leader, the minority whip, and all the black, most of the black Democrats that were from the hood knew the deal, and it was a radical leftist, Wilmington, Durham, that tried to vote down this bill.
Insanity.
Crazy.
So
Yes.
wait. So you mean to tell me somebody was like, well, you should just be able to have it. I know you don't work in the industry. Why can't I have 32 gallons of embalming fluid? What if I want to embalm my driveway? I mean, what's the excuse that you could make if you're not
One,
a mortician that does that? If you're not an embalmer, what are you doing with the embalming juice?
That's all I'm trying to figure out.
it's common sense, right?
Yes.
One leftist was like, "Oh, kids get high on Freon and glue. We're not making that illegal. We shouldn't make this illegal." I'm like,
Well,
"Nah,
you
this
know
ain't the
what?
same
I,
thing."
I gotta push back on one thing. No, it's not common sense. What common sense is, unfortunately, is no. What we're talking about is good sense because you can only go along with this nonsense, right? With herd mentality. You have
Mhm.
critical thinker. Well, not even a critical thinker. You have to be honest with yourself and go, it's embalming fluid. You just have to say it out loud. Like you should
Right.
have to say it out loud. Like, hey, you want to make the embalming fluid illegal to possess unless you're on the way to
Unless you're
work as a
embalming
mortician?
something. So, but
Yes.
let me go back
I
here
don't
real
know.
quick.
That's
And I
crazy.
and I as somebody who works with the Frederick Douglass Foundation, we appreciate you obviously being a member of the foundation and our focus on education. What you talked about before this embalming fluid thing about putting more men in the classroom. I'll make the distinction. We need more black men in the classroom. Absolutely. But men, period, manly, masculine, everyday examples of manhood, American manhood back in the classroom is really important. And I didn't want to gloss over that. So those two things, and I know there's some other legislation we want to talk about. Those two things fit kind of a motif for me, which is, it sounds like to me you're going up there trying to fight for your community. What's it been like to deal with the flack that you get from people on the left now that you're up there and you're the guy with the pen and the vote? What's that flack been like from the left, and how weird is it seeing the leftist in action up there in Raleigh?
So it's interesting because there are three categories of I would put on the left. There are some on the left who honestly have never had a conversation with a conservative. And the minute you speak the truth, they'll either condescend and be like, man, I never heard that. Thank you for sharing. And they'll vote with you. Or they'll actually go back and study it. So there are people who, for some reason, have lived in a rock. I don't know. They've never been exposed. Then there are those who know the truth, but vote against their conscience. And they will work against you because they got to hold the party line. And they may even tell you that in the private conversation. I've had people do that. And then lastly, there are what I call the Looney Tunes. They're the ones who are living in La La Land, who, if they were in charge, there would be no jail. There would be no prosecution of drugs. Crime would, be a thing of the past. And, there would be gender fluidity. It's just the absolute nuts on way out on the spectrum. And what's interesting is that they will do their best to try to paint false pictures. For instance, you'll hear this all the time, that public schools are failing because of charter schools and private schools and lack of funding. Although we see in places like Chicago and Baltimore that don't have charter private funding or competition, they're still failing. And if not failing, worse in North Carolina. So that's not the issue. But then they won't talk to you about privacy in women's bathrooms. They won't talk about keeping men out of female sports. They won't talk about the pronoun issues. And then they won't talk about the fact that we have teachers being assaulted on camera. What are we not seeing? And then they refuse to acknowledge that those things are influential in the breakdown of our communities and schools. So it's fascinating to deal with these folks. I always enjoy a good conversation because I believe truth stands on its own.
Right.
And there have been some that I've had the pleasure of leading to another way of thinking. And that's good. And then there are some where I realize, I'm like, man, you're just never going to be my friend. We're never going to work together. This is what it's going to be. Oh, well,
Right.
there's nothing I can do about that.
So, what one thing real quick before we move forward, and this kind of leads into this next thing, is you talked about, the teachers being assaulted by students, and you're working on something around discipline in the classroom, discipline in the schools. And I think it's important for folks to hear about that. You want to talk a little bit about what you're working on in that regard, because that's for the protection of teachers too. When you look at some of this stuff, it's the teachers that are bearing the brunt of, and I'm just going to say it, of poor parenting. So,
yes.
Talk a little bit about that. I'm curious to hear what you're working on there.
So we just passed a bill. It's going to the Senate that will allow schools to have stiffer penalties. One of the reasons North Carolina schools have gone to hell, so to speak, is we have really shackled principals and assistant principals and told them that you can't expel kids, you can't suspend kids. And it's not that we're trying to get rid of kids, but I'll give you an example. When I was a teacher, we had a young man threaten to kill a teacher and shoot up the school. He got 10 days suspension. That child, I don't care if it was a joke, should not be back in school, considering what we're seeing nationwide with people who are doing just that. See, that's an example right there of the negative effects of poor legislation. So this bill we passed removes that. And it allows principals to have stiffer penalties on problem students. And of course, the argument is from the radical leftists, this disproportionately affects Black children. To which I responded, Ma'am, my parents grew up in the South when you could be hung from a tree. And they taught me that no matter who you are, no one can stop your success. And I am sick of people telling me that black kids cannot measure up to higher standards. That is absurd. Yes, they can. We can meet the same standards as Asians and Hispanics and Caucasians. It is absurd.
Well,
And that's what's happening is in the name of equity, they're telling us we can't meet the standards with math. We can't meet the standards of social studies. We can't meet the standards with English. Those things are racist because somehow we don't measure up. What is racist is the fact that we don't think that black kids can, so we lower the bar. That is this what I call the
Yeah.
soft bigotry of low expectations.
Yes,
Just
sir.
absolutely absurd. And it's the same thing with things like ID, voter ID. How is it that voter ID targets African Americans? I have no idea. Are you telling me we can get an ID for liquor, tobacco, the library, Social Security office? We produced a president, the first Secretary of State. We produced Frederick Douglass, Martin Luther King, Colin Powell, Condoleezza Rice. But we somehow can't produce an ID? That is some garbage. And that's why I'm glad to have my job because I get to say that on record for the whole world to see.
One thing that I found interesting about the whole voter ID thing is when I looked at the law, I was on Patrick Cannon's radio show in Charlotte, and they surprised me with the Democrat like to oppose me, and he hit me with in the racist voter ID law, and I was like, sir, do you know that they will take 130 types of identification
Yes.
to get a voter registered?
and that's not hyperbole. That's not a joke. That's
No,
there are dozens upon dozens of things that you can turn.
no,
It
in
was
the
it
North
was like
Carolina law,
library card,
it's
drug
130.
prescription card. It was cards I didn't even know existed. I ain't gonna lie. They take stuff I didn't get. I was like,
It was
you can get a card for that?
130 things that they will take.
Yo, I think they will take a Sam's Club card for you.
Yes, they will.
I'm not kidding. Like they would because they got a name and a picture and like, bro,
I've even
No way.
saw where now they are allowing people to register with intersections. Like you don't even gotta
let
live
me
nowhere.
ask this question because I'm in New York and maybe you see this, but what's your thoughts on this push to have illegal immigrants participate in our voting process? I just because
Oh,
this is a push to New York, I just want to get you this.
it is absolutely absurd. That's it. I mean, what it is happening is they're trying to blur the lines of citizenry. Look, you're either a citizen or you're not. I don't care if you pay taxes. Everybody pays sales taxes. That's the price of doing business here. Taxes do not equate to citizenship.
Correct.
That equates to doing business here. That's what taxes equate. And what kills me is Europe is militant on this. And we somehow pretend that they're not. I was going to go to college in England when I was a freshman. They made me sign a contract that I would not get a job and that I had to have 2 years in the bank of my own personal support. That's how militant they are about their economy. And most European nations are very controlled with their economy. So this whole idea of allowing illegals to participate in the process because somehow they pay taxes, that does not mean that they're citizens. There is a process to be a citizen, and there are responsibilities that come with being a citizen, and you do not get the double dip here. That is that.
So I got matter of fact, since you brought up that voting question, I see our good friend Kevin McCrane. He's working with a group called Citizens Only Voting, Americans Only Voting. How do we even out the economic development between the large urban areas and the rural areas in the state? Shouts out to Kebrick and the Douglas Leadership Institute. Great question for you there.
So I would say it's multifaceted. When you look at what I call a reversing the tide in marginalized and depressed areas, there are 4 things that usually do it. There's policy. Good policy allows people the freedom to succeed, and it doesn't make people dependent on the government. We need good policy. The second thing is economics. We have to have jobs in place that reward the hardworking, give people a long-term outlook, and allow them to develop generational wealth. The third thing we have to have is a good education system that leans into that direction. And then lastly, I always say is we have to have spirituality that teaches people the power of redemption and personal responsibility. Now, I'm in a rural area that is also depressed. One of the things we've been working on is this problem we're talking right here is how do we compete with the large urban areas? So let's go down the line. Educationally, we have the Call Me Mr. Bill, which is putting minority men in the classroom. We're also restoring discipline. Third, we're getting rid of CRT, which is not helping anybody. And then fourth, we just launched a program in my county called the Employer Concierge. We're paying for a position with our local EDC, Economic Development Council, that will coordinate between our large industries here and go back to middle and high school to let students know what's available and train them to that point in the 12th grade within the school system so that when they graduate, they will walk into six-figure jobs. Because what's the reality is most employers are getting away from the idea of a degree because the science just doesn't support it. What they've discovered is more reliable than a degree is identifying the workforce before it gets to you and developing it along that pipeline. Japan has been doing this. So that's the education and the employer side. And then when you get into the policy side, I'm working on a bill right now that will help low-income homeowners buy their homes. Because one thing we see about revitalized areas is that rent goes down in terms of people renting and the number of people owning home goes up. If you go to, I was in Brooklyn not long ago. Actually, I just came back from Brooklyn today, and they have a project there called Nehemiah Homes, which is they're experimenting to see what would happen to an area if we got away from letting people rent and actually buy using alternative credit and the debt to income ratio. And what they discovered is that when people owned the homes, the areas were generally taken better care of because of the stock of ownership. Right. And so policy wise, we're trying to work right now in my area to turn the rental ratio around and lower rental people who rent and pick up people who are actually buying their homes. So you got to make these things work together and in tandem. There's no one idea that does it all. Usually it's, I would say, a collection of actions taken together. So one thing I've learned is that, yeah, I deal with policy, but I'm always talking to my mayor, my city council, my economic development coordinator, my sheriff, my school board. And sometimes there are things I need them to do. And other times there'll be things that they need me to do. But we're working in tandem because the American people love the magic pill, right? We expand Medicaid and all of our ills are taken care of. Or, we boost the school funding and now the world is going to be great and we're going to have green trees and no nuclear wars. Or, the big green deal or a new green deal. No one thing does it all. That's not even realistic. Yet that's what we're being sold. The truth is, as a policymaker, my job goes far beyond what I do in office. It goes to what I do every day. Even when I'm not in office, I'm in my district, meeting with people, finding ideas, working hard to come up with good solutions. And so I say there's a lot that can be done. It's just a matter of not working in a silo and I look at everything like a war and having a central point and objective I'm trying to take and moving forces along that axis to take that central point.
Excellent. One last thing I want to pop up here on the screen.
Before you say that, I love what he said, right? Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, I just got to get that off. Great answer on the home ownership side. Good answer. So I just wanted to let you know folks are listening and they appreciate what you had to say on that, bro.
I appreciate the way you put that because one thing we learned when we looked at privately owned parks like New York Central Park, it was a beautiful place before it was taken over by the government, and then it turned into what it became in the 80s and stuff like that. So you definitely are on to something, and I don't want people, again, this is for the folks that may see this that may be on the fence, right? These are practical things that he's saying, like the pride in ownership, the pride in hard work, the pride in your community. Listen, even if you are renting it, treat it like you own it, so you can own it one day. You know what I mean? Because just because you rent it don't mean you should throw the garbage out the window. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean that. So Ali, before we get out of here, right? We got
Right.
one other thing you didn't tell him though. You didn't, right?
No, I didn't tell him.
You might want to tell him. That.
Okay. So this is your first time on the Urban Conservative. And as such, in order to get your 30-second plug, you are going to have to survive the lightning round. Raheem and I are going to come up with some things. You get to either give us your one answer, one word response, or make a choice of the two. I've got a couple of things. One word response when I say this word or name. And then Raheem's got some things he's going to go through with you real quick. And if you survive, the screen is yours for 30 seconds to plug away. All right. First thing I'm going to ask you, first thing that comes to mind, you just give me the first thing that comes to mind when you hear it. Biggie.
Oh, Notorious.
All right. That's a good one. That's a good one for that.
Nike or Adidas?
Nike.
Okay.
He's a Nike guy. Okay. All right. First thing that comes to mind when I say Howard the Duck.
Space.
Okay.
Fair enough. Right. Jay-Z or Nas?
Jay-Z.
Okay. That's a Jay-Z guy. Okay. All right. I've got one for you. I'm going to jump into your territory. Hamburger or hot dog guy?
Hamburger.
Burger guy. Okay.
Pickles? No pickles?
Pickles.
Extra pickles?
No extra pickles.
I'm the only person that does extra
And
pickles.
just a pickle or two.
I like the whole jar. Like I put like half the jar on my burger.
All right. So now, last question in this. You want to give it to him, book?
No, you got it.
All right. So you are stuck on a desert island for the rest of your natural given life. You have one meal for breakfast every day, one meal for lunch every day, one meal for dinner every day. You get one album and one book.
Ooh.
So you're stuck on this island forever. You get one breakfast, one lunch, one dinner, one book, and one album. So what do you got? Breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
So breakfast would be pancakes with eggs and steak. Lunch would be tacos, chicken, beef, and pork, 6 of them. Dinner would be a half-baked chicken, Peruvian style, with rice, black beans, and plantains.
Okay, so you get one book the entire time you're on this island for the rest of your life. What book do you got?
The Bible.
Okay, and you get one album.
Ooh, one album. It's got to be epic.
Because you're
I
listening
would,
to it for the rest of your life every day. That's all you got.
if I had to do one, I would do Hans Zimmer's Gladiator score. That's what I would do.
Okay, well, now
That's
we're gonna
epic.
do that.
Now we got to go listen to Hans Zimmer's Gladiator. Well, look, you have survived the lightning round here on the Urban Conservative. Representative Fontenot, the screen is yours. Tell the folks how they can support you, how they can get a hold of you, and the floor is yours. Go ahead, take it away.
Awesome. Well, I just want to say thank you, Abdul Rahim. I had a blast in the Urban Conservative. Be glad to come back anytime. And to everybody that's watching, I say what is going to change our country is you. You will change our country. The answers to our everyday problems are in your hands by you participating in the electoral process, getting involved, and also making your voice heard for common sense ideas. You know, one thing that I will say that I don't like about my job is that the crazy people always are talking, and the people with good ideas sometimes get intimidated. So please voice your ideas and concern. Never let yourself be intimidated by what's going on in the world. Our enemy is loud, but they are not powerful, and they can be beaten. Truth stands on its own. Get involved. I'd love to hear from you. My email is ken.fontenot@ncledge.gov. And I would definitely love to hear from you and love your support as we continue to run. I'm running again in 2024 and looking forward to doing another year and making some good things happen.
Excellent. Well, again, ladies and gentlemen, Representative Ken Fontenot, representing Wilson and Nash counties, NC House District 24. You have been checking out the Urban Conservative here on a Monday night. As always, if you haven't done so already, we'd appreciate you jumping over to tuconservative.com, getting yourself a membership. We will see you all back here bright and early for top of the morning at 9 a.m. right here on the Urban Conservative. Until then, y'all have a wonderful, blessed, and positive evening. We'll see y'all tomorrow. Peace.
Just because you're black doesn't mean you have to vote Democrat. This year, in order to see benefits for our communities, we need to vote outside the box. Find out more by visiting us at tuconservative.com.